Howdy, hi. I hope that you're doing well. Hope that you are giving yourself some love, that you're being productive. I've had a very productive day myself. Whatever you're doing for the holidays, I hope you're having safe travels, or that anybody that's traveling to or from you is having safe travels. Hope you're feeling well. If for any reason you're starting to feel under the weather, or you've been feeling under the weather, I would like to encourage you to take a bath, to eat some oranges or some pineapple or some lemon, lime, get some good vitamin C in you. Drink some warm tea, some hot cocoa. Eat something good for yourself. Just maybe meditate a bit so that you can get into your own space and you can feel comfortable and confident back in yourself. Whatever it is that you need to do, you know. Maybe you've been putting off working out or something like that and you need to be doing that. Maybe you've just been dealing with people that take a lot of energy out of you. Take some time alone. Enjoy your evening, you know. Watch a movie or something by yourself. Do something for yourself so that you can kind of get back on your own pace. Because these are hard times. You know, the end of the year is always a lot on people. It's an important time to reflect. It's an important time to kind of reprioritize, get on top of things. As I say that, head and harmony come out. Reprioritize, it came out actually on its side like this. Okay, one more and then I'm going to use tarot for clarification. Thank you. That one really flew out. This one side, it came like this. This one came first. This one, okay. Alright, let's get some clarification for each of these cards. We'll start there. This is what I'm working with right now. Okay, so the first card that came out was Head and Harmony. And on its side, it's kind of like a transition. Maybe you're in a period of time of moving right now. Maybe you're changing like careers or friends groups, a relationship, something serious, something that has felt like home. You're adventuring out into something new, and it doesn't seem to be necessarily known for the fact that it's pointed in this direction. It's pointed off into the unknown, into the distance. The second card that came out was Destiny Couple in the upright. And so it would seem that that should, well, what I was going to say was that that should be the foundation. Maybe you're moving. That being the foundation makes me feel like that's what you're moving into, but the way that it is here almost makes it like that's what you're moving away from. Maybe a past relationship, maybe a past something that you thought was your destiny. I mean, it says couple, but that could just speak of union. Could speak of a specific couple that you've been affiliated with somehow. Could speak of romance in general. And it's something that, you know, has been a foundation for you in the past, and now you're moving into something new and unknown. It could be just a past commitment and you're moving into something that's more balanced. Well, and then time came out. No, trunk. Trunk up. That would make sense. But it also came out on its side and it's facing this direction. So I'm getting that as a clarification that it really is like we're branching out from this idea of a couple destiny. There's a union that is the centerfold. That's the main focus of this read. That's likely the main focus of either your current reality or like your very near future. In one direction we have head harmony, in the other direction we have trunk. So head harmony is like reprioritizing it in order to figure out how to fit it in with what it is you want to do with your actual self. With this idea of home, maybe changing your concepts of couples, of partnerships in that way, marriage, commitments. It's also the roots of this trunk that moves out and branches out into this tree. So it's also like reaffirming this idea of stabilization, of using that in order to be able to branch out. Maybe in the past, you were in a relationship that was very chaotic and there was no harmony in the home. And now you're moving into a relationship that is going to bring harmony, not just to your relationship, but also to yourself and how you're able to branch out from there. And how you're able to kind of, really flourish and gain this sense of abundance with all of this different stuff that you want to interact with in the future. This relationship, though, this coupling seems to be, it says destiny right on the card. It seems to be something quite important, quite significant when it comes to this process. Now we have head harmony being clarified by the Hanged Man in the upright. In the reverse. So it's like maybe there was a period of time where you were in some type of hermit mode, where everything seemed very chaotic in order for you. There was some chaos that left the home feeling quite chaotic, but that was necessary to see everything upside down in order to become enlightened, to know what it is that you really want and what you're really after. And now that you've gone through that, now you're seeing things more clearly and more enlightened, and you're seeing, how it is that you would like to be moving forward. Destiny, the couple card we have being clarified by the Page of Swords in the reverse. Which is like, normally in the upright is a sign of opportunity, it's a sign of like playfulness almost. It's a sign of like courage. It's a sign of feeling confident in oneself, even when you know that your skills aren't necessarily perfect, but kind of being willing to still seize opportunity. In the reverse, I'm getting like there's like this waiting period. The winds of change are blowing around this couple, this partnership. And it's kind of just like standing still. It's not this intrepid moving forward. It's a patient waiting still. Even though we were just in the Hanged Man and that's in the reverse now. It's like that was waiting on us to make sure that we were clear, but now we're waiting on divine timing. Which I guess is why, like I said, when Trunk first came out, I read it as time. So maybe that goes into that too. We're waiting on this divine timing. There's a certain abundance and growth that needs to happen before everything kind of falls into place properly. Also with like the swallows on this, like it's giving me that sense of like the birds follow very specific circadian rhythms. They follow very specific seasons, you know, and you can almost judge, you know, the course of the weather and the course of what time of year it is according to their flight patterns and those types of things. So everything is about divine timing in that way. Then we have trunk being clarified by the Knight of Swords in the upright, which I'm seeing that this abundance that is able to, like, the Hanged Man in the reverse is giving me that this has already been considered quite for some time. And there's been a process of being able to come to this understanding of what we're really working with, which is why we're no longer just in this unskilled, opportunistic mindset. We're in waiting on divine timing in order to see this abundance. And so this abundance seems to be quite certain, quite sure. You know, the trunk is the entire essence of the tree. And, you know, this trunk specifically has an eye on it. So, you know, it's this idea of like really being able to see those things, to have that wisdom, to be sure of oneself within that sense of stability. As it moves out, moving away from this chaos, moving into this sense of abundance. And that is offering the right, like, means for one to follow their truest passions, for one to follow their innermost truth, with a sense of clarity, a sense of like I say, like passion. There's this sense of excitement, certainty, confidence, like a strength that comes in with this of, you know, he has a sword out and the horse is running super quickly and they're almost running against the wind in this way, or it's just that everything looks like it's moving because of how fast they're running. And the horse is looking back at it, I'm almost like, are you sure that we can even go this fast? And he's like, onward, keep going. Yes, I'm sure. Any more clarification for any of these? Let's see. Can I get more clarification about this couple? Ah, the devil. In the upright. Okay, so this destiny, this coupling, it's felt like a great temptation. It's felt like something kind of intimidating, something scary, something potentially toxic or negative, something that maybe came at a cost, something that yeah, and maybe it's just like a mindset of, you know, I've always been non-committal and always been comfortable being a certain type of non-committal, and now I realize that I actually want to commit to something more seriously. And as much as that's always felt like a compromise and it's always felt like I would lose myself in that, I'm confident as I move forward into this. And I think it's also kind of just giving me this energy of like, that mindset even, or like whatever that mindset may be, coming from always feeling like one was just like a little too sinful or like a little too like involved in carnality to some degree to really find the perfect partner and to have this sense of like liberty, of abundance, of truth, of grace, of passion, something worth fighting for. It always felt like falling back into habits and addictions, that being almost safer. It didn't feel like also that like if there was somebody that like that could match those types of things, that would end up being a divine partnership. Yet what we're starting to see through all of this is that this is that divine partnership. And so it almost is giving me too that there must be this idea of like, especially because the Knight of Swords is headed towards that in that direction, it's almost like being able to work with each other to overcome both of the individuals' issues, you know, like, because that's also represented here in that card is like their tattoos of swallows on these arms. And so it's like, you know, there was this permanence, this kind of sin, this kind of mark, the scars, some type of trauma. It's some type of trauma bond. And that felt like it could be potentially limiting. But what we're seeing is that with the right mindset and with the right timing, that actually ends up being something quite beneficial. Can I know more about the chaos in this home? What that had to do with? The chaos in the home that is being moved away from. The Nine of Pentacles in the reverse. So there was an imbalance of finances. There was a discomfort with finances or material wealth, material stability. I guess it doesn't have to be necessarily finances. It's not talking about emotions though, and it's not necessarily talking about just like bare facts. So it is, you know, maybe there was some sort of misalignment. I'm getting more the impression just that like it's kind of that idea of like you have a person that makes money and you have a person that spends money, right? And that ultimately ends up being toxic and frustrating and not beneficial to either partner. Well, okay, it probably ends up being a little more beneficial to the one that spends, but it's not really catering to. It put this person, you know, in the hanged man position. And so coming out in the reverse, like, is an enlightenment about those things. Can I have any, what else? Eight of Pentacles in the upright. Okay, so it felt like somebody was like working really hard for an abundance that just was not coming through whatever this home situation was, whether that was a past partnership, a family dynamic, just a specific place maybe that someone was living. You know, and like I said, it's more the idea of home. It doesn't necessarily mean where someone was living. It could mean like just, you know, a career that one had made their home, just like this comfort, that comfort zone, right? Comfort zone. So we're talking about, you know, having worked so hard and still not feeling like it was ever enough. And it putting us in this feeling of being trapped and being kind of caught in chaos, by being in our comfort zone. And we're talking about stepping outside of that comfort zone, which is why we see the devil as well. You know, there's a lot of trepidation about that. But in embracing one's wholeness and fullness, including their shadow, we're able to move away from, there's a lot of financial issues, and we're moving into something that's more abundant and more substantial. Potentially just even better concepts, more abundant concepts, maybe better investments that way. Different relationships. Can I get anything more about this trunk? The Eight of Swords in the upright. So what I'm seeing with this is that, like, the trunk itself can't do shit by itself. Being blinded and bound. It is a tool being used. And so it's like using all of these other senses that are part of oneself, seeing oneself as the tree. But really, I'm seeing, for whatever reason, I'm seeing these cards as looking like each other in the sense that this is the trunk, these are the branches, and here are the roots here in the water. And so what I'm seeing of that is that in one embracing their shadow, it creates this intense vulnerability. But what that's leading to is this awakened intuition. And what's coming out of that is all of these truths. The branches and the leaves, they're all these truths. It's like really revealing a lot of things, especially on an emotional level. We're pulling from our emotions in this way in order to move through our vulnerability. We're opening up about our emotions in order to move through that vulnerability, in order to realize that really we have all of these swords at our disposal. You know, and then it's right next to the Knight of Swords. So we have, you know, taking those swords into our hands and then being able to use them. It's so crazy because it's like this is talking about breaking ancestral trauma, breaking family curses, breaking, instability within the home, especially when it came to finances, the way that people were making their money, or the way that people have viewed money, and what type of chaos that was causing, and how that was constantly leaving everything out of harmony. It was leaving everything out of logic. It was, you know, this is what we do because this is what we know and this is what we've always done. And we had to go through this process and through this union in order to, and like with this forward focus on abundance and what it really meant, and kind of allow ourselves to embrace this darkness in order to be able to really see, you know, because I think for a long time that's why we were stuck in this energy that was leading to this energy, was because we really thought that like doing a certain type of work, doing a certain type of thing, or doing it hard enough or doing it long enough was going to gain us. And that those concepts had been passed down. They'd been inherited. Our parents believed that as well. Their parents believed that as well. Probably started during the Great Depression. Could have been far deeper than that. But it's those concepts also limited us. They, you know, I've been married and divorced. When I got married, the idea was to please my family that way, that this was what was going to please my family, because I was living in sin by living with my partner at the time. And I was like, okay, then I'm just going to commit to it. And that's what's going to make this a good, solid relationship. And that's what's going to make it right. I had no concept of these deeper aspects of myself. I had yet to acknowledge my shadow whatsoever. What do we have on the bottom here? The Three of Cups in the reverse. I had no sense of, true union with myself, like true union with anybody. I was also just as toxic, and I was just trying to do these toxic things that had not made my parents happy, had not made their parents happy, had not made their parents happy, but we just keep trying because eventually one of us is going to get it right, right? And it's like after going through this, it's like, no, I'm not doing that the same way. I'm not doing that the same way. I'm going to embrace this uncomfortability. I'm going to embrace my vulnerability. I'm going to embrace the unknown. And it created this heightened sense of awareness. You know, like I said, like the tree has to trust in itself, but also in the other things around it in order for it to become what it is. Without the roots, without the branches, without the leaves, it wouldn't be able to properly function. And that's why it wasn't always properly functioning. You know, the family tree, it wasn't getting where anybody wanted it to get. And so it's like, once that understanding becomes made known, then it's taking those truths that one has found through themselves and then running back into the past with a sense of passion and a sense of clarity and a sense of integrity and a sense of victory, that I'm going to overcome these things now. I don't have to be afraid. I don't like the things that I bound myself to, the people that I bound myself to, the relationships that I bound myself to, these commitments that I made. I see now why they weren't working. I see now why they weren't serving a greater abundance. I see why they were leaving things chaotic. And then moving back to, you know, really work these things out. You know, and we're working it out to what? What is the final result? Give me 3 cards. What is the final results? Give me 1 more card. What is the final results? Not the final result, but after we do all this work, rather, and move back into, you know, this is just going back through the ancestral healing. We got the 10 of Swords in the reverse, followed by the 2 of Wands in the reverse, followed by the World in the upright. Okay, so we're no longer overburdened, you know, in this way, like how this was leaving us feeling. We're no longer overburdened anymore. We're no longer overburdened by any of this. We've done the work. We've seen the things. We've seen so much at this point. I mean, there's an eye on our family tree. So we see it, we get it. We've done the work. We've moved back. We're doing the healing now. We're healing now. We're no longer hurt. We're healing. So we're no longer having to, you know, normally this card would be like a card of like leading up into an adventure, of looking out into the distance as to like, and he has the world in his hand, you know, so he's looking out at like this opportunity. This is almost like I don't have to have the world in my hand. I don't have to keep running. I don't have to go anywhere. I'm contented with what little I have at this point because it serves me. It isn't toxic anymore. You know, it was one thing when it constantly used to feel like no matter what work we were doing, it never was leading to any sort of genuine benefit. But now we see that even the very littlest things that we do is benefiting us. It's part of the healing. We no longer have to keep grasping onto these things, which is reminding me of like in the Tao Te Ching, where it says, well, and it says in the Bible too, that those who grip too tightly to life and to earth, to the world and of itself, you know, they end up losing it. So it's being able to release those things. The world, right? We have the world in the upright. It's letting it become what it is meant to be. Trusting that, being able to let it be what it is. I think there was a concept maybe in the past that you had to do a certain work, a certain way in order to gain the world. And then once we realized that maybe we didn't even want to gain the world, was when it started to reveal itself to us, when we started to actually be able to really receive it and embrace it, this genuine abundance. But it was in this healing process, and it was really in the embracing of all of these different things that we are able to find this type of freedom and liberty and, you know, peace in the midst of all of the chaos. All right. Is there anything else? The 3 of Wands on its side. So this is like opportunity. This is like looking out with a sense of uncertainty as to what's coming next. It's both the end and the beginning of a cycle. And on its side, it's kind of just really feeling that way to me. On its side, it's pointing from... That's really pointing from all of that, back into that final resolve. And so it's like we're in this transition, right now. What we've seen in the recent past has been chaos in a family dynamic or in a home or within our comfort zones, a sense of discomfort, a sense of having to work so hard and not ever receiving enough. And we're currently in transition of being able to come into a divine union and embrace these things fully. And it doesn't even have to be with something externally or someone externally. It can very easily just be within the self in order to overcome this uncertainty and this fear, and coming into a union with one's truest self. Being able to embrace that, like, maybe I'm not so different from the rest of my family. Maybe, I've been involved in these things and I have to accept that in order to move on. But the second that happens is where this abundance starts to come in, and this awareness and this ability to be able to embrace the emotions and the vulnerability and all of these different skills and truths learned in order to come back and move into this ultimate success. But it's definitely not a success that was initially set out for. And that's kind of part of this entire process too, is that it's not something so... It's the entire world, so it's fully tangible, but it's not tangible in the way that maybe we had measured it in the past, which was fully pentacles. It's not about that. It's something so much greater than that. So much greater than that. That's where this, like, looking out into the wild blue yonder and being like, there's so many different places I could go or things I could do. And that in of itself is a sense of enrichment, which is making me reflect too on, like, it's not the sense of head and harmony, the sense of, of this card, the sense of trunk are like stable. You build a house, that's where your house is. You grow a tree, that's where that tree is. You can uproot those things, you can lift those things and carry them somewhere else. It takes a lot of work to do that though, right? But that's kind of what we're talking about both too, is that it's having that sense of security that you have this thing, but also knowing that at any time you could go anywhere and do anything. The world is your oyster. And, it's also part of the reward of this healing that's being done. So this was quick. This was an interesting read, but overall, I would say that that's quite positive. So I would say that if you resonate with that at all, you have a lot to look forward to. Don't be afraid to go through the process. Don't be afraid to get in touch with your emotions, to be willing to be vulnerable. That's really going to be a big key in moving forward that way. That's where that healing comes from. You have 10 swords in your bag. It's not like you can't be like, oh, hey, this hurts. But it's okay if it hurts. You have to be able to acknowledge those things and to be able to be like, this is where I came from. This is what's been done. This is what it is. And this is what I'm going to do about it. Until you really recognize those things, you're not going to be able to confront them properly. And that's kind of like the biggest point of being able to blind and bind yourself in that way to see these truths, is that, like, no longer are you taking them so personal. I know when I first went through one of my most major healing processes that I'm still constantly going through, consistently rather, was understanding abuse for what it is, understanding when I had undergone abuse, even when I didn't recognize it as such, or when those that were abusing me didn't recognize it as such, or definitely wouldn't call it as such, right? Recognizing that these things had truly been inherited, and that didn't make an excuse for it. That making an excuse for it was how I was now continuing those cycles and not able to heal. And how much I didn't want to resonate with that, and how like ego killing it felt like to accept that I had been given to those things in my own ways. But it's like, this is, might be triggering, but I think it's important for someone to hear. When I experienced sexual abuse as a child, or as a young person, a teenager and whatnot, the way I took that onto myself was quite personal. It was very hard for me to understand. And because it was being done by a family member, not all the time, not all of the abuse I've experienced hasn't been from family, but specifically the sexual abuse that was incestuous was particularly hard to process, because family is so close, and these people mean something. They have titles, they have positions in your life, If your mom, dad, brother, sister, cousin, grandparent assault you in these ways, and especially as a child, there's no way around the sense that you're going to want to normalize that, because it's such a hard thing to process. And then especially because when you're processing it, when you feel like you've been abused, because it is abuse, incest is abuse. I don't care how friendly it comes across, or how well-meaning it was, or how understandable it may be. Most people that haven't been involved with that would not ever use any of those terms to describe it, but those that have been involved with it would understand what I mean when I say those things. But ultimately, it is abuse, and it's very hard to recognize that when, like, in my case, like with my brother, like, he himself was a child when the abuse first started. He might have been older than me, he should have known better, but at the same time, he didn't know better because he himself had been abused and had been, those types of behaviors were essentially excuses were made for them by the adults that we grew up around. So I learned very quickly to not, it was like, don't take offense, like, just let it happen. It just is what it is. And it just became a norm. Now, I knew it wasn't normal. We didn't talk about it with everybody. It wasn't just out in the open. It wasn't something that even most of our family would actively engage in. So we knew that it was something weird and something bad and something different, but at the same time, because it was within the very small circle of my own family, it just felt normalized. And it was very hard to process that it was abuse when it's like, yeah, but that's my best friend. That's my brother. He's not abusing me. It's like, even if he's not meaning to, that is abuse, And that's what made it so conflicting for me as I got older, when I was with my first boyfriend, and the one time we had sex all the time. That was the first person I lost my virginity to. We had sex like multiple times a day, every time that we were together. The one time that I wasn't trying to engage that way, and I said no, he didn't take it seriously, because why would I say no when I've always said yes? And he just continued, even when I didn't want it, and even when I was like crying and being all emotional, but like it continued. It wasn't aggressive. It was something that I didn't have much fight against, really, and like I didn't look at that like it was abusive, even though it, obviously, when I say it, most people would recognize that it was. But I took it personal. I took it like, well, I've earned this because I'm the one constantly engaging this way anyways. I didn't understand how consent worked very well. I didn't understand a lot of things because of the nature of the things I was dealing with within my family or within my upbringing to begin with. So, it's easy for a lot of people that haven't been through these experiences to look from the outside in and judge these things as monstrous, as evil, as so bad innately. And it's not that they aren't to a degree, but like what's not commonly recognized is how often these things have been inherited, how often these things have been long continued cycles, how often these things have been manipulated and made excused by, those in authority that, those experiencing it would hope to be able to trust to make sound decisions. And so then it just becomes normalized, even though it is not normal. And like, it's so weird to have that difference of like I said, like, it wasn't like, I didn't even talk about this stuff until I was a grown adult. Like, it took me until I was 24 before I even started talking about these things. And then I immediately started having to become estranged from my family because they couldn't handle me talking about these things. They could admit it to me, but their fear was that I would start talking about these things openly. And the more that they fought me about that and wouldn't just work these things out with me, the more it became necessary that I did talk about these things openly, because I realized that, if it happens to me, if it's happened to me, it could happen to anybody. And it is happening to people. And, I have so many people that, without knowing those things about me, would see me as innately so positive or so friendly or so beneficial. Like, yeah, you can watch my kids. Yeah, you can clean my house. Yeah, you can stay here. You can do these things and stuff like that. But then they start to hear those things and it's like, whoa, like it makes people feel some type of way, right? Thankfully, I've learned how to express these things and to communicate these things, and I care very much to in order to work these things out. And I've gotten to a point where I can talk about such things where people can be like empathetic and it's educational for them in a way that isn't just totally shocking and triggering. But the importance of that is because, it's easy for me. I'm a nice person. I'm easy to get along with. I've always been extremely easy to get along with. I am well articulated, as I struggle to say it. I know myself well. I've been separated from my family long enough that I can talk about these things. Like, there's a lot of people find me easy on the eyes, like there's like these different things that make it so much easier for me to be able to communicate these things, where like it's so much harder for other people, for most people. And like, that's such a shame. And I just want to be able to make a space where like those that have like, like especially like for myself being a woman in comparison to men, it's so much harder for men to be able to talk about the ways that they've been assaulted, because that's not manly. You can't be a victim and a man. And like, especially not if you're like in a leadership position, if you're any type of authority as a man, like you don't get to be the victim. You don't have ever gotten to be offended. And if people heard you say that you had been like sexually assaulted by your family members, there's this weird concept that like that can't happen to boys and that doesn't happen to men. And that, men are just objects for sex. Like they essentially, they're the ones given to it. And it's really, really, really fucked up. So like, it's very important for me to be able to communicate these things, I say this all the time, but not to call anybody out, not to try to make monsters of anybody, to talk openly about these things, because it's a common issue. It's a really fucked up common issue. Like, it's fucked up how common it is. And it's not something that's just going to go away. These things are inherited. These things are passed down. These little circles are where these things keep happening. And until we can talk openly about these things, it's going to keep happening. So it's very important that we learn how to communicate these things. I know people that have, been assaulted, like, in just the craziest ways, and they didn't know how to explain it. And I remember when that first happened with my first boyfriend, and I remember talking to my stepdad about it and being like, I don't think I was raped, but I do think I was assaulted. And he was like, well, you know, those terms, la, la, la. He wasn't the right person necessarily to talk about those things because I ended up just taking it on to myself and feeling guilty. There's no sense of real resolution there. But like, we do need to be able to have a space where we can communicate the differences between those things, and without like jumping into this crazy victim mentality that like, yes, you can be victimized and then now do your healing work. Like, it's unfortunate, but like, there has to be a separation between that and just innately damning people, because generally speaking, the people that are doing the abusing have been trained that way. They went through those things. It's been passed down to them as well. You know, not every time. Jeffrey Dahmer swore that he had never been through anything like that, but I'm pretty sure he also said that he had been introduced to very violent pornography at a very susceptible time in his life and developmental period. So there's things to consider with everyone. And it's not to not hold people accountable to their actions. You kill a person, if you kill a person in cold blood, I don't have a problem with the same being done to you, to be honest. You rape a child, you don't deserve to be alive. There has to be, but at the same time, like, there has to be a better way to look at these things and to understand these things, because like, truly, even if you're going to put somebody to death for their behavior, which again, like, I'm not arguing that. I think that actions have consequences, but those people aren't just a lost cause just because of those things. You can still put a person to death, but first give them proper counseling. First give them proper therapy. First help them save their own souls. Let them deal with the consequences. There's plenty of consequences I've had to deal with even after I learned the lesson. Even after I made the changes, even after I became a better person. Like, that's how consequences tend to work, right? So like, nobody's free of those things. And honestly, like, rushing people into just demonize them, call them a monster, put them to death, like, you're almost giving them a power that is unrightly earned. You know, like, they don't deserve to be given that power. They should be treated like everybody else and held accountable to those actions. So, you know, it takes two to tango in that sort of way too, where like, every time that I've been assaulted or abused, no, there were plenty of times that I did not ask for it. I was completely innocent, but the fact that it happened to me now becomes my responsibility. Now that's part of my reality. Now that's something I have to take on, and that's something I have to process, and that's something I have to work through. And that's okay. Everything I've ever been through has made me a better person. It's made me a stronger person. It's made me more aware. It's made me more accountable. It's helped me to set better boundaries so that those things don't continue happening. It's also been a way that those people ended up in a space of karma where they hadn't been prior. You know, so I can't say that all things don't work out for good to those that love good. I believe that they truly do. But that's not to say that those that do, you know, any sort of evil should just be allowed to do any sort of evil. There has to be a balance in those types of things. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing in that reading as well, is that we just did, was that, you know, as you move into a point, you hit a point where all of a sudden now it's moving back through those things with this confidence and with this strength, so that you can find that balance. And I will say, just before my memory is completely dead, that like, I'm taking that personal, because I have become estranged from my family, for the most part. Every time I've tried to go back and find some sort of resolution, it's mostly been just, I've gone back and tried to maintain some sort of relationship. And that's not what's being asked of me. What's being asked of me is to take everything that I've learned and to go back and resolve all of those things, which would look very different. And it's a lot more intimidating and it's a lot more scary, but at the same time, like, that's the point of all the work that I've done. And I have all of the means to do it rightly. And we've already seen how it ends, you know, with the world being your oyster, with everything ending up in your favor. Because that's part of the destiny too. That's really the union that we're talking about, is with our highest selves and our greatest purpose and our greatest destiny. So hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully you guys are having a good holiday. I'll probably do another one of these tomorrow. I'll see you soon.